A gute Woche. The Rebbe soll gesund sein, began the Farbrengen this afternoon. So this is the Shabbos after Yud Shvat. This week on Monday was Yud Shvat, and today is the Shabbos afterwards. And as we know, when it comes Shabbos, everything that happened during the entire week is elevated on the following Shabbos. Especially when we're talking about a Yolzeit of a Tzaddik. Based on what the Alter Rebbe writes in Igeres HaKodesh, that Chaye HaTzadik, the life of the Tzadik, Einom Chayim Psoriim. It's not a Gashmiistic life. Kiim Chayim Ruchniim. The life of a Tzadik, when the Tzadik is alive on this world, his life throughout all his years is a spiritual life. Memela, when it comes the day of his Yahrzeit, this is when we can realize and understand the inyan of Ma Zaroi Bachayim Afhu Bachayim. The Gemara says regarding Yaakov Avinu. The Gemara says regarding Yaakov Avinu that Yaakov Avinu did not pass away. Yaakov Avinu loy meis. So the Gemara says, but we know for a fact he did. So the Gemara responds, Ma Zaroi Bachayim Afhu Bachayim. As long as his children are alive, it is considered like as if he would also be alive. Memela the same. When we're talking about a tzaddik, though we know that there are actual halachas, primarily the inyan of saying Kaddish and observing all the inyanim of Yolzeit, which all of this shows that the tzaddik was taka nifta. But on the other hand, being that when we are dealing with a tzaddik, it applies what the Gemara says, Ma zaroi b'chayim, afu b'chayim, and being that his teachings and his inyanim, which he left us, which he related to us, are all alive. So Memele, it is considered like Afhu Bachayim, like the Tzaddik himself would also be alive. And this is something which is understood to anyone. Anyone who realizes what the life of a Tzaddik is, can understand this idea as well. This is one inyan in the Shabbos. A second advantage in the Shabbos is the fact that this Shabbos is 15 days in the month, Tesvav. 15 is the inyan of Kaima Siyara Bashlimuse, that the moon stands in its completeness. The Siyara, the Levana, is in its completeness. Especially we know that Yisrael Meinin Levana, that Yidden count their calendar according to the moon. Memela, this is something which is extremely meaningful. It is Taki Yisrael Meinin Levana. But on the other hand, the fact that today is Kaim Siyara Bashlemusa, that the Levana is in its completeness, this is something which is seen by all, not only Eden, even Goyim realize this as well. Then we come to the third inyan, that today is Tu B'Shvat. And 15 days in the month of Shvat is Rosh Hashanah Lo-Ilonis. It's the new year for Ilonis, for tree. And this, the Rebbe says, is also something which is not only for Yidden, because it applies to all trees. And we're talking about trees, it applies to the trees of a Yid, as well as to the trees of a non-Jew. Mamela, this inyan, that today is a special day, this is something which is realized really by everyone. Yidden, and even non-Jews as well, also understand that all these factors which you just mentioned, that these are real outstanding inyanim, each and every one of them separately. And how much more so when they all come together. Above all of this, we are standing in a very special year. The year is an extremely special one, for the fact that the beginning of the year, it was a Yontif Shel Rosh Hashanah Shechal Liyos B'Shabbos, the year began with a Shabbos. And not only that, the entire year is a Shabbos. Because the year we are in is the Shnas HaShmita, the 7th year. And this is a sabbatical year, Shnas HaShmita, Shnas Shabbosoin. And to understand the difference of this year as opposed to any other years, the Rebbe says this is very simple and very obvious. Just like a person understands that there's a difference between Shabbos and the Sheishes Yimei HaMaaseh, the same way one can realize that there's a difference between this year and the Sheishes Shonim and the 6 following years or the 6 preceding years. And this inyan, that this year is a special year and today's day is very special, and all of these inyanim are coming combined, this is something which the Rebbe says has to have a relevance to each and every one of us. To adults, or even to children. And even to children. Where do we find that an inyan should be negay even to children? This, the Rebbe says, is very obvious. We find a takib b'negei an inyan that has to do with Shemitah.
Benegei Shemitah, we find that at the end of Shemitah, the following Sukkot, the Sukkot which comes following Shemitah, there's an inyan of Hakel. Hakel means that everyone has to be gathered. The entire Jewish community has to congregate to the Beis HaMikdash. And the Pasuk tells us who has to come? Not only adults. Hakel, Anoshim, V'taf. Even little youngsters also have to be brought to the Beis HaMikdash. So we see that there are inyanim which are negated to everyone, not only to adults, but to children as well. The Rebbe is concluding that the importance of these days, this day, which we just discussed, all of the inyan, as well as Bichlal, the year which we are in, which is something of much significance, all of this has a shaykhs not only to adults, but it's supposed to have a special meaning to children as well. Seems like that in the particular meaning the Rebbe is going to get to a little bit later in the second Sikha. Above all of this, in other words, above all of these outstanding things which have a shaykhs to today's day, there is another meaning regarding today. That today's day, today's Shabbos is called Shabbos Shira. Because in the reading of today's Torah, we read the Shira which Moshe of Bnei Yisrael have sung when they left Mitzrayim, and the Rebbe performed all of these outstanding miracles, and after crossing the sea, they all came exclaimed with the Shira, the expression of thanking the Rebbe led by Moshe Rabbeinu. So we have the Shira in the Sedra. We also have the Shira in the Haftarah. Today's Haftarah is the Haftarah of the song of the Veira, Vatoshar the Veira. But says, however, we can say that just like we know there is Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh, there's the written Torah and there's the oral Torah. The same the Rebbe says we can say that the Shira of Vatoshar the Veira, though it is in Tanakh, in Navi, but we may say that Navi, in comparison to Chumash, is like Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh. We know that when Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah from the Rabbeinu Shalom, the Rambam tells us, HaTorah b'pirusha nitna, that Torah was given with all of its explanation, which includes Navi, and it includes all of Torah Shebal Peh, all of this is included in what the Rabbeinu Shalom gave Moshe Rabbeinu. But what is the Iker Inyan of Torah? In terms of Torah Shebiksav, the Iker of Torah Shebiksav is Chumash, the Chamisha Chumash Torah. The Mela, when we are looking which Shira is more of an Inyan Nitzchi, more of an eternal Inyan, is it the Shira that we say in the Haftarah, or is it the Shira that we read in the Sedra? Obviously, we can understand that it is the Shira that we read in the Sedra. First of all, Rabbi explained that the Inyan of Haftarah was something which was added on in later years. There was a time when there was a decree that the Yidden were prohibited from laning in the Torah. That is when they arranged this concept of Haftarahs. But what is the original Inyan of reading, the real Inyan of reading? It's the reading of the Torah, the reading of the Sedra. The Inyan of Haftarah is something which was added on. But the primary Inyan is the Kriyas HaTorah. Memela, when we're looking at what is the main Shira, it is the Shira of Vaz Yashir. In the Shira of Vaz Yashir, we have the pasuk of Hashem Yimloch Lo'ilam V'od. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will rule eternally. So this pasuk again represents something which is eternal. The fact that the Rebbe will rule the world eternally. This pasuk of Hashem Yimloch Lo'ilam V'od comes in continuation to previous psukim which we read in the Shira. Notisa Yamincha Tivla. Tiviyemai v'sitaemai b'har nachlasecha. What does the Tiviyemai v'sitaemai b'har nachlasecha refer to? That refers to the building of the Beis HaMikdash. So actually, in the Shira, we have a strong referral to the building of the Beis HaMikdash, which before the Beis HaMikdash was the Mishkan. Regarding the Mishkan, we find that the Rabbeinu Shalom said, "Va'asuli Mishkan, va'asuli Mikdash, v'shachamti b'soicham." So Chazal explain why is the expression b'soy chom and not b'soy choy. The Shbaruch should have said, "He's make me a mikdash where the Shechina will rest, where place for him to dwell, and he will dwell in it." The pasuk does not say in it, but the pasuk says amongst them. What does it mean amongst them? That the Rebishter dwells, the Shechina dwells in each and every Yid. B'soich kol echad ve'echad. On one hand, we know the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the pasuk says, "Hashamayim u'shmei hashamayim lo yichalkelucha," that all of the heavens are not a sufficient vessel to accommodate the Rebishter. And here we say, "Afki habayis hazeh," it is this house, the house of the Beis HaMikdash, this is the place which is suitable to accommodate the Rabbeinu Shalom. Now that we are coming to a step that it is not only the physical Beis HaMikdash, the same applies to the Beis HaMikdash which is within each and every Yid. Because at the same time, when the Rebishter gave the commandment of building a Beis HaMikdash, at the same time the Rabbeinu Shalom also related the idea that there is a Beis HaMikdash being built in each and every Yid. Meaning that each and every Yid has room to accommodate the Rabbeinu Shalom. And the Rabbeinu Shalom dwells b'soich kol echad ve'echad. In Gemara we find, when the Gemara discusses various levels of preparation, how a Yid is supposed to prepare himself, so the Gemara uses the expression that Tara mevia lidei kedusha. It is purity that brings the sanctity to holiness. And Mela, when we have to prepare ourselves for kedusha, what do we mean by kedusha? For the inyan of Beis HaMikdash, for the inyan of Shechina, how do we prepare ourselves to that? That is through Tara, through spiritual purity. Mela, what does all of this mean relating to us? Relating to us, all this means the Inyan Rebbe says, which he's been speaking about recently, and which he, according to his opinion, the Rebbe says, in fact, he expressed himself, whether it was here in the Farbrengen or later, Lefi anius daiti, according to my humble opinion, Rebbe says it is the most appropriate thing that every person, every home, everybody should take their homes, diras hareshus, which means a home where we do all our things which we are prohibited to do it. Permitted to do it, thank you. And in our homes, we shall instill this inyan of a base kedusha, that our home should excel in all of the three areas. In the area of Torah, in the area of Avodah, as well as in the area of Gemilas Chasad. And this is something which is extremely important to each and every one of us. And the koiches, was an interesting expression, the koiches, the strength to be able to do this, we get from the generals, the klolisdike type of such buildings which are in every city or in every area, because every area has a shul or a Beis HaMedrash, which this is the inyan of a shul and a Beis HaMedrash, which excels in each of all of these inyanim. So from the general such type of structure which is in every area, in every community, we get the strength to turn our private homes also into such type of homes. And this is something which is shaykhs to everybody. It has a shaykhs to adults, and it has a shaykhs to children. And particularly when we're talking on this Shabbos, in Shabbos Shira is a very opportune time to talk about an inyan which has a special shaykhs to children. And here the Rebbe says that there is a sicha from the Frierdiker Rebbe, the year Tafshim Beis, 1942, where the Frierdiker Rebbe relates about a custom which was instituted by the Maharal Prague, who instituted many beautiful customs and was responsible for many beautiful customs. And the Maharal Prague instituted a minhag that on Shabbos Shira, all the children, boys and girls separately, should be gathered by their malamdim, by their teachers, and they should be given kasha. What is kasha?
Grain.
Buckwheat. Anyways, they should be given kasha, and the children in turn will distribute this kasha to the birds and to the ducks and to the chickens and so on. And this is something which was a beautiful minik. The Rebbe says, like many inyonim, which we don't stress on them year after year, these customs are forgotten. But the truth is, it's a beautiful and outstanding custom. And the reason for it is, because when the Rebbe split the sea for the Yidden, the Rebbe performed it that the miracle in such a way that they were walking, each and every Shevet was walking in a different aisle. And the aisles which were created between the Shvatim, L'goizer Yamsuf, L'gzara, that's the expression that is Chazal, they were like instant walls which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created between each and every Shevet. And on these walls, the most beautiful fruit grew. The children played a very outstanding role in Kriyas Yamsuf, because the children were the ones that exclaimed, Zeh Keli Vanveyu. This is my God, Vanveyu, and I will beautify him. Zeh, in Lashon HaKodesh, is an expression of Mare Be'etzboi V'oimer Zeh. One points with his finger and he says, Zeh, this is it. Where did the children know the Rebbe from? Obviously, from this expression we understand the children kind of recognize the Rebbe. Where did they recognize the Rebbe from? Because the Rebbe was with them in Mitzrayim. Chazal tell us that the Rebbe was the one that saw to it that the children should be fed honey, dvash misela, honey from rocks, and oil from stones. Who was the one that provided the children with all of their needs? It was the Rabbeinu Shalom. The parents were involved in terrible hard labor working for Pari. So who was the one that took an interest that the children should be fed with whatever they needed? It was HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now when the children went out of Mitzrayim and they came to Kriyas Yamsuf, they recognized the Rabbeinu Shalom. So Mamela, this day of Shabbos Shira is extremely meaningful for children. Getting back to the inyan which we just discussed, every child also, the Rebbe continues, should take part in this inyan of seeing to it. Every child has a room in the house, or a corner in the house, or whatever, however the situation is, structure is set up. So children should also see to it that their rooms in their houses should also be set up in such a way that in their rooms, every single child should strive to excel in each one of these areas. And a little more practical, the Rebbe asks that every child should have a siddur, its own siddur, a siddur which belongs to every child in the house. And in the siddur, as it's customary to write into a siddur, Lashem ha'aretz loya, it's customary to write it on Svarim, whether you spell it out or all you write is only Lamed Hey, abbreviation Vav, and then you write the name of the child. And by doing this, the child will know that this siddur is his or hers. This is the inyan of the kav of avodah, the kav of tefillah. Then we come to the kav of Torah. Most appropriate thing that every child should have a chumash of its own. The child should know that this is her chumash. The Rebbe says in many communities, previous generations, it was the custom to teach a child the aleph beis from, not just from an aleph beis chart, but to teach the aleph beis from the letters from the aleph beis in the chumash. And as there's an expression in Medrash, Yavayu tahoirim v'yisasku b'tahoirim. This expression is applied. There's a custom that when a child begins to learn Chumash, the child begins with Chumash Vayikra. So the Medrash says, Yavayu tahoirim. Let come the pure ones. Who is meant the pure ones? The tahoirim, the little infants, the children. V'yisasku, and let them learn, and let them be zech mesasik in tahoirim, in the Chumash which deals with korbanos, which is also an inyan of Tara, an inyan of purity. And then we also come to the third kav, to the kav of tzedakah, that a child should be trained, the Rebbe says. That every child is given its allowance, its spending money. And a child knows that with spending money, a child could spend it and enjoy it. As the Alter Rebbe writes in general regarding tzedakah, that for adults as well, that the greatness of tzedakah is that a person takes money which he can be
He can buy something, he can acquire something which he can really enjoy. And a person overlooks that and goes ahead and gives this money away for tzedakah. So children, the Rebbe says, have to be trained in the same way, that they have to take a part of their spending money and give it to tzedakah. And the most appropriate way is also that every child should have a tzedakah pushka. And the tzedakah pushka, which every child has, should have the child's name on the tzedakah pushka. So the child will identify with this pushka. And then the child will know that at every opportunity he or she has, they put money into the pushka, and this money goes for tzedakah. The Rebbe also mentioned a very interesting custom, that there was once a custom that when children were being taught the Aleph Beis, they were taught the Aleph Beis from the cover page of the Tanya, from the Shablat, which is the cover page for the Tanya. And the way it was done is that sweets were spread all over the page. So the child went after the page because the child wanted the sweets, the child wanted the candy. And as an expression of love to it, the child would kiss the page. And Memela, by doing this, ultimately instill into the child a love to kissing the page, not only for the sweets that are attached to the page, but for the spiritual value of the page, and this will remain with the child, that the child will have a love to all of these inyanim, to the ruchnis, the inyanim of Torah. And the Rebbe concluded this whole inyan with a Hasidische Taich. There's a Gemara that one Tana or Amira is by the other one, Avuch b'mai havezohir tfei. What did your father excel in? And which mitzvahs did your father excel? So Hasidus teaches that Zohir doesn't only mean to excel in a mitzvah. Zohir means to illuminate, to shine. In other words, every person has his mitzvah, which he really involves himself into, and his koch and his gishmak is in it to such an extent that he shines in the mitzvah. Mele the Rebbe is urging us that our dedication to all of these inyanim has to be in a way of Zohir Tvei, that our complete dedication should be to all of these inyanim, that we should shine in this and lichtig werden, and all of these inyanim of seeing to it that our homes, our private homes and our private areas are turned into, as Rebbe used the expression later, into a Beis Chabad, which the inyan of a Beis Chabad is to excel in each one of these inyanim, in each one of these areas, and Torah, Avodah, and Gebulas Chasad. Rebbe says he knows there are those that will think back and ask that what is the Tide Zohir Tvei, which we just mentioned in the Gemara. Zohir Tvei, when we went to Yeshiva with our Melamed, the Cheder, and the Melamed explained this piece of Gemara to us, the Melamed did not teach that Zohir Tvei means which mitzvah does one illuminate more, but Zohir Tvei means in which mitzvah was he more careful in, which is the Pashat Taich of Zohir Tvei, and which mitzvah did he excel. The Rebbe says, though, we find in Yonim the same minyan that could be used in a low tone way, and the same minyan could be blown up in an extremely meaningful way. And the same is regarding this inyan of Zohir Tvei. We could teach Zohir Tvei in the simple sense, and we could teach Zohir Tvei in the in-depth teach, in the Hasidische teach, that Zohir Tvei means to illuminate the world. That one naturally illuminates the world, but meaning that one gets illuminated into this in particular inyan which he gets involved. The example the Rebbe brought is from Yitzias Mitzrayim. The concept of Yitzias Mitzrayim, on one hand, it is a very vital concept, to such an extent that the very first of the Aseres HaDibros begins with Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Hotzicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. So what is stressed and underlined in the very first mitzvah which a Yid is commanded, in the major mitzvah, the mitzvah of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Hotzicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim, that we constantly have to refer to Yitzias Mitzrayim. Then we know that daily we recite Krishma, and in reciting Krishma daily, we also refer to Yitzias Mitzrayim. However, we celebrate a Seder, Pesach. When we celebrate the Seder Pesach, it's also Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. The celebration of Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim on Pesach And that has to be with matzah, morer, menachem lefanecha, with matzah and morer in front of us. That is done in a completely different way. One cannot compare the expression, the feeling that a Yid has when he fulfills the mitzvah of Zeicha L'Yitzias Mitzrayim at the Seder table to the Zeicha L'Yitzias Mitzrayim, which we do daily when we recite Krishma in the morning and the evening. Naturally, common sense tells us right away that there is a big difference, the experience an individual has by each one of these Zeicha L'Yitzias Mitzrayim, though all of them are Zeicha L'Yitzias Mitzrayim. Pesach night the Seder is Zeicha L'Yitzias Mitzrayim, and whenever we say Krishma in the morning and the evening, it's also Zeicha L'Yitzias Mitzrayim. However, we see by people it is not so. Memela, what do we derive from this? What is the Rebbe bringing out from this? That we can have at times the same inyan, and sometimes the inyan is done in a kind of like bypassing way, where we don't give it much stress and much attention, and the very same minyan could be done in a way where it is given the fullest, most special type of attention, the most attention possible, like we could do at the Seder night. Or the way we find Yitzias Mitzrayim being stressed in Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Later in the Farbrengen, as usual, that the Rebbe refers to a Rashi in this week's Sedre. And today the Rebbe learned a Rashi in Parshas Beshalach, where the Torah tells us, Vayovoi Amalek, Vayelochem im Yisrael berefidim. That is in Kapitel Yud Zayin, Pasuk Ches, in Shvi, in today's Parsha. Torah tells us that Amalek came and started up with the Yidden, and where was this? In Refidim. If we were to look into Rashi tells us an interpretation on this pasuk, and Rashi quotes the words Vayovei Amalek, and Rashi goes ahead and says Somach Parsha Zu Lemikra Zeh. Why is this Parsha regarding Amalek starting up with the Yidden discussed here? Why is it discussed here? And Rashi goes ahead and says as follows: that the Rebbe says, I am always amongst you. Tamid ani beinechem umezuman l'chol tzorchechem. And I'm ready to help you in all your ways. Va'atem oimrim hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu imoyin. We read in the previous pasuk that the Yidden were disappointed that they didn't have all of their needs, and therefore they expressed themselves, Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu imoyin. Is there God amongst us or isn't He? So how come Yidden should say an expression like that? So that is why Amalek, the Rebbe kind of like punished him right away, and Amalek, they had the problem with Amalek. Chayechem, Rashi goes on, Sha'akelev ba v'noishecheschem. Here a dog will be coming and will bite you. V'atem tzeir kiralai, and then you will have to scream to me, v'teidon heichanani, and then you will be forced to know where I am. Not enough. Rashi doesn't stop with this. That's sufficient. Mashal. Rashi has a parable to explain this. Adam shehirkid b'noyal ksefay. A person took his child on his shoulders, v'yotzel l'derech, and that is how they went out on a long trip, on a long journey. Haya isa ben roye chayfetz. Child saw something, v'ima abba toil chayfetz, says, Father, give me this. V'teinli, and he gives him. And give me this. V'unoiselay, and he gives him. V'chein shniya, this is done a second time. V'chein shlishis, it's done a third time. Paglu ba'adam echad, they met one person. Amalay oisei haben. So the child tells him, Ra'isa es Abba, did you see my father? Because the child was on his father's shoulder, so he didn't know where his father was. So he's inquiring, where's his father? Amar loy, Adib, so his father said, Eincha yedeya hechanani, you don't know where I am? So he threw him off him, and that is first when the dog came and bit the child. The same Rashi says is here. The Yidden are not realizing that the Rabbeinu Shalom is carrying them on their shoulders. The Yidden have just experienced outstanding miracles. They saw what happened to Mitzrayim. They saw what happened by the Yam. And they are unhappy. So Mamela, the Rebbe caused the problem right away. Led them to have to do with Amalek, and that is when they had to turn to Hashem and beg for Hashem's assistance. And here it was already obvious to them that it was when Moshe's hands were lifted up for Govar Yisrael,
So they already realized that there is the Rebbeinu Shloim who is guiding them and guarding them and protecting them, and everything is in the hands of Hashem. Rebbe is asking several questions on this. First of all, what kind of question is this? Why is this parsha mentioned here? What do you mean, why is this parsha mentioned here? It happened here, so it's mentioned here. Very simple. Zayr is telling us what happened. After the Yidden had this incident, and they expressed themselves that way regarding the Rebbeinu Shloim, that is what happened next. That is what happened. So why is Rashi going to raise the question?
Why this pasuk is discussed here? Very simple. You know why it's discussed here? Because it happened here. Now let us understand what is the mashal that Rashi is giving us. Mashal is a very strange mashal. The mashal makes it worse. Not only doesn't it make it better, it makes it worse. What does Rashi say in the Pshat? Rashi in the Pshat says that the Rebbe is constantly watching Yid. At all occasions he's guarding them and watching them and providing them with all of their needs. What does he say in the mashal? He's giving a mashal of a son who was riding on his father's shoulders, and 3 times he asked for things and his father gave it to him. Rebbe obviously is giving us things more than 3 times. Why? From the Pirush, it seems that the Rebbe is giving us whatever we need. Rashi is giving a mashal, which is a kind of a limitation, that the Rebbe has given us in 3 different occasions what we asked for. Obviously he's giving it to us at more than 3 different occasions. And basically what the Rebbe is explaining here, I've also mentioned an interesting Ramban. In Pasuk Vav, the Pasuk says, Pasuk is talking to the Yidden complaining they didn't have no water. So the Pasuk says, Hineni oimid lefanecha sham al atzur b'chayrev. The Rebbe says he's standing on the rock in Chayrev, and he's telling Moshe, v'hikisa b'atzur, and you will hit the rock, v'yotzu memenu mayim, and then you will get water. Where are the Yidden now, geographically? Geographically, they are in Refidim. Where is the stone? Where is the rock? The Chayrev. What is Chayrev? Chayrev, we all know, means Har Sinai. So there's an interesting Ramban. The Ramban says that the rock was in Chayrev. Really, it's Sinai. And the Rebbe performed a miracle that the water flow was going, there was a flow was created where the water was going from Chayrev to where the Yidden were at present. In Pshuta Shel Mikra, the Rebbe says it's very hard to accept such type of a parish. But again, this is how the Ramban learns. To understand this Rashi, Rebbe is learning. Rashi says, "Samach parsha zu lemikra zeh," that this parsha regarding Amalek was put right next to this pasuk. Lemikra zeh. What does mikra zeh mean? This pasuk. Usually, we don't find many times in Chumash that Rashi should discuss why 2 inyanim are mentioned one next to another. It's really not Rashi's inyan in the realm of Pshat. But whenever it does happen, whenever Rashi does explain why one inyan is next to another, whatever it happens, Rashi always uses the expression that this parsha is next to this parsha for this particular inyan. Here Rashi doesn't use the term parsha. Rashi says this parsha is next to this pasuk. In other words, Rashi is not troubled with the fact why this inyan is discussed here. This inyan is discussed here just like we said before because it belongs here. The inyan why Rashi is troubled, why was this put in exactly after the previous pasuk? That is the question. Samach parsha zeh lemikra zeh. Could have been a pasuk earlier, could have been a pasuk later. Why dafke after the Yidden expressed themselves with the words of Vayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu im ayin? Is God amongst us or isn't He? And Rashi gives reason why. Because being that the Yidden expressed themselves in such a unappreciative way, that is why this aroused and this led to it, this led to the Vayavei Amalek. Here the Rebbe is learning that really the Yidden at that time were protected by the Rebbe. They were protected by whom? They were protected by the clouds. Rebbe set up the Ananei HaKavod, and the Ananei protected the Yidden. However, which Yidden were affected by Amalek? As Rashi says weiter, these were those Yidden, Hanechasholem Achecha, as the pasuk uses the expression weiter. In other words, those Yidden that went outside of the cloud. So as long as a Yid is protected with the cloud, Shekhinah protects him. But if a Yid drifts away, that is when he's looking after problems. And that is when he gets into an expression of Ayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu imayin, doubting, is there God amongst us or isn't he? And this is what led to the Vayavei Amalek Vayilachem im Yisrael b'Refid. Why Rashi stresses the mashal, a father that picked up his child on his shoulder. What is Rashi out to say here? Why this mashal? Why a father carrying him on his shoulder? Why not on his hands? Everything in Rashi is accurate. As we mentioned earlier, Rashi says the child asked for 3 things. But it says everything is extremely accurate. An expression of carrying a child on one's shoulders, this is an expression you're picking up the child. In other words, an Indian of picking up. Who is the father? The father is the Rebishter. Who are the children? Children are Yidden. The Rebishter is picking us up on his shoulders. This is reflecting an idea of picking up Yidden l'mayla mederech hateva, above the realm of nature. In other words, taking us off the floor. He's picking us up higher. And not stam higher on his shoulders. Shoulders is already an expression of height, which is taking us away from earth. What is this? The inyanim which the Rebishter gave the Yidden when the Yidden were in the middle. Number 1, the Rebishter gave them the water. The water was a special type of a water. Whether we will learn, like the Ramban, that the water came from Chayre. Literally, in Gashmis it came from Har Sinai. Or even if we will not accept this pshat that it came from Har Sinai. But we do see that it has a shaykhs to Sinai. It has a shaykhs to Chayre. We see the tie of Lamayla Mederach HaTeva, the stress how Yidden are above the realm of nature. How Yidden are tied with Torah. How Yidden are tied with what happened in Chayrev. That was the first revelation which Moshe had with the Rabbeinu Shalom, with the burning bush, with the snare. That was at Har Chayrev. In other words, the Indian of Lamayla Mederach HaTeva, this is stressed in the idea of Chayrev. As well as the Indian of the man. This is also an Indian of Lamayla Mederach HaTeva. What's the man? The man is Lechem min HaShamayim. It's not called Lechem min HaAretz. In the name, in the title of the man, we have right away what the man is. What is the man? It's a special type of a feeding. It's a feeding of Lechem min HaShamayim. The Rebishter is giving Yidden, feeding them in such a way above the realm of nature. I don't recall, I spoke about a few people, if the Rebbe mentioned what the 3rd thing was. But obviously, it does seem that there are inyanim which the Rebishter, Rashi is referring to specific inyanim, which the Rebishter did to Yidden by picking them up, carrying them on his shoulders, which this is the expression of the Rebishter taking Yidden out of the realm of nature and putting them l'mayla mederach hateva, above the realm of nature. Every inyan has its Chazarah, the lesson which we derive from it. Rabbi says, children, Bnei Yisrael, on the shoulders of the father. In other words, Yidden we are asking from our father various things, and there are various things that the Rebishter gives us. However, there is one thing which the Rebishter has not given us as yet, and that is that we are over 1900 years in Galus, and Yidden are begging from the Rabbeinu Shalom ad Mosai. How much longer will we be in Galus? And let the Rebishter give us this thing already. This is something which Yidden, we are begging from our Father to give us something. Why does he not respond to this request? Rashi says here that the Rebishter responds to all of the requests which Yidden are asking, and as he brings the mashal of the father, whose son is on his shoulders, and he's giving him whatever he wants. Here he's holding us on his shoulders, but why is he not giving us such an important thing which we are begging from him? Ad Masai, how much longer should we be in Galus? It's already more than 1900 years that we are in Galus, and that we should be taken out. Mashiach should come, put an end to the Galus, and give us this request which we are asking from him. Let him fulfill this request. Talking about these inyanim,
in fact, it was early in the Farbrengen, also where the Rebbe mentioned the importance of Hasidische gatherings, Hasidische Farbrengens, and a Hasidische Farbrengen where Hasidische Nigen is sung. All of this are expressions of Achdus. It's an expression of unity. Yidden people gather together, take part in a Chassidish Farbrengen, or in a Siyum HaRambam, or in dedication of the Chabad house, a Beis Chabad. All of this is our expressions of unity. Mela, by doing all of these inyanim, the Rebbe says, this rushes, this hastes the coming of Mashiach. because the reason why we went into Golas was because of sinas chinam. There was hatred without any reason from one Jew to another, and that led to the Churban HaBayis. And the Mela the Rebbe says, how do we rectify it now? We now rectify it by love, by avas chinam, love without any reason, just pure love from one Yid to another. Avas chinam, which is the love from one Yid to another, and when this is done, Avas Yisrael, to the not only Avas Yisrael but also Achdus Yisrael, and this is done in the fullest extent, this leads and rushes the coming of the Mashiach. Mela the Rebbe said, here the Rebbe called that all of those that have submitted mashke for any of such type of an occasion which will be taking place, they should come up and the Rebbe gave them the mashke and they should announce for what particular union it is. And Rebbe also mentioned the Siyam HaRambam, which will be taking place here tomorrow, and it should be in a way of Roiv Am Hadras Melech, large attendance. This gives beauty, adds beauty to the Melech. And Memela, it's extremely important, Taka, that every one of us take part in the Siyam HaRambam tomorrow afternoon, Mr. Shem, in the Marriott, 1 o'clock at Broadway and 46th Street. Later in the Farbrengen, Rebbe also mentioned that today, being that today is Tesvav Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, and this is the Rosh Hashanah Li'Ilonis, Chazal tell us, based on a pasuk, Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, that man is compared to a tree. Rebbe raised the question, why dafke is man compared to tree and not to anything else? Why to an eitz hasadeh and not to any other thing? Rebbe responded that in trees we see the nature of something that grows is that it keeps on growing, constantly keeps on growing. It's a meach has this nature, this plus that it keeps on growing. This is the inyan which we are to derive from a tzameach. Mailim bekoitish, that a Jew can never satisfy himself that he is already at a proper level, he's already reached a certain level, a certain point, and he's not going to go any further. Just like we find by tzameach, that tzameach constantly keeps on growing, this same midah, this same concept has to be introduced into each and every one of us. Talking about the importance of learning Rambam, Rebbe stressed that now we've just begun learning Rambam again, and when we go through it the second time, it is at a yet higher madriga than the first time. And today's Shir Rambam, in fact, is the first 3 prokim of the Rambam, which is Yesod HaYesoda, is the beginning of the Sefer Rambam. Because these couple of days we were learning the listing of the mitzvahs before the Rambam's Chibur. Today we began learning the first perik of Hilchas Yesodei HaTorah. This is where the Rambam begins that the fundamental of all fundamentals is to believe in the existence of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And the Rebbe tied this together with the conclusion of the Sefer Rambam. How does the Rambam conclude? The Rambam concludes with the pasuk, U'mala ha'aretz de'es Hashem kamayim layom echasem, that the world will become full of... Rambam at the end of his Sefer discusses what the world will look like when Mashiach will come. So there he says that the world will become full of wisdom, kamayim layom echasem, just like waters cover the rivers, covers the ocean. Mela the Rebbe says, both of these inyanim go hand in hand. When people live up to the Yesod HaYesodos v'Amud HaChochmos, when we live up that the basic and fundamental of everything is to believe in the existence of the Rebbeinu Shalom, this leads us that what is mentioned at the end of the Rambam, the prophecy, that U'mala ha'aretz de'es Hashem kamayim layom echasem, that will be fulfilled. Talking about the importance of learning Rambam, Rebbe mentioned that it's, again, how important it is, and not like
those that criticize the learning of the Rambam and claim that by learning Rambam, this may mislead psukim in halacha. We learn Rambam, and we're going to take decisions in halacha out of the Rambam, and we don't always follow these decisions when it comes halacha l'maaseh. So the learning of the Rambam is something which can create chas v'shalom certain type of problems. Rabbi says this is totally ridiculous. Let us bring a very, very obvious example. Obvious example is we learn Chumash with a child. And when we learn Chumash with a child, there are many inyanim which are discussed in Chumash. For example, the issa of meat and dairies together. In the Torah, it's only mentioned that we're not allowed to cook it together. The Chachamim have introduced that being that the Torah mentions it more than once, it doesn't only mean cooking meat and dairy together, we're also prohibited to eat meat and dairy together. So can there be a person that will say, but you can't teach a child Chumash, because the child is going to learn the child is going to think that we're only not allowed to cook it together. However, to eat it together, we are allowed to. So by teaching a child Chumash, we are misleading the child in naturally, this is totally ridiculous. And on the contrary, we all know that we are learning Rambam not to take inyanim of halacha out of the Rambam. We know that halacha we have to come on to the Shulchan Aruch, and particularly to the opinion of the Ramah. We all know that there is expression in this week's Sedre, before Sheni, the pasuk says, "Uvnei Yisrael yoitzim biyad Roma," that the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim with an outstretched arm. So there's a famous expression, the world says, Uvnei Yisrael, that the Yidden throughout all the years are adhering and are going by the instruction of the Ramah. Not Ramah with a Hey, but Ramah with an Aleph, who was the author of the Shulchan Aruch. So Mamela, we know that we all know that this is not to take halachas out of, but this is an union of learning Torah. And on the contrary, those that do not appreciate the union of learning Rambam, those are the same people that do not appreciate the fact that Yidden are begging that the Rebbe should take us out of Golas, and those are the same ones that don't care that Yidden are in Golas over 1900 years and are not begging for the Golas to stop and to take an end. And it's simply an Indian against the kavod, against the honor of the Rambam. The Rambam himself writes that he has written this sefer, and it took him a period of 10 years to write his sefer. The Rambam writes. The Rambam uses the expression shinasti es mosnai, which means he really undertook himself and he put himself completely into it. And this is something which the Rambam really did. And the Rambam Taka writes in the introduction of the sefer that his sefer is set up in a way ka koton ka godel. It is good for the koton, for the small person. It is good for the godel, for the adult. And anyone can learn Chumash, Chamisha Chumshe Torah, and after learning Chamisha Chumshe Torah, can go ahead and learn the sefer of the Rambam, as the Rambam himself writes, and this will give him a complete understanding, a complete idea in Torah. And the Rebbe asked that these words which he's speaking against those who are criticizing the learning of the Rambam. The Rebbe says there's no need to go ahead and have any type of debates. This is not our inyan. He's just talking amongst us. He doesn't want us to get involved in any type of inyanim. Rebbe kept on stressing the expression, Yavoi Bal HaKerem, let come the owner of the vineyard and let him straighten out all of his problems. In other words, the Rebbe created him. Let the Rebbe worry about it. It's not our inyan in any way whatsoever to get involved in it. The inyan of a chassid is, as the Rebbe used the expression, lernt Teure. Learn Teure, nigle and chsidis. Und seid mekayim mitzvahs behidu. And let us fulfill mitzvahs in a beautiful way, in a way with all types of hidurim. And by doing this, the Rebbe says, we will remain in the cloud. in the Anon, just like there was the cloud which protected the Yidden when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. There is a cloud that's protecting us now as well. Let us remain in the cloud and not go out of the cloud. Let us be in a way of the Atem Hadveikim B'Hashem Elokeichem. Let us be attached to Hashem Elokeichem Chayim Kulchem Ayoim. And this gives us life. Gives us gashmistic life, and it gives us spiritual life. But says a Yidzinyan is to be involved in Bonne, Chayim, Mazoine, be involved with children and with health and with his parnasa. And the Rebbe will give us all of this in a way of revicha, in a very broad way. The Rebbe will bench us. But Chas v'Shalom, to go ahead and speak in the name of Lubavitch, in the name of Chassidim, in the name of Chassidus, and go ahead and create any type of debates, any type of discussion, this is not what he wants. Whatever, Rebbe says, whatever he's talking on this Inyan remains here. Ochen vei, the Rebbe used the expression, to those who are embarrassing the kavod of the Nesher HaGodol, the great eagle, who is referring to the Rambam. And this is something which is up to the honor. It's an Inyan that has to do with the kavod of the Rambam, an Inyan that has to do with the greatness of learning Torah. Rebbe says there's a mechilta, very interesting mechilta, based on the pasuk, "Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe Avdei," that the Yidden believed in the Eibishter and in Moshe when they went out of Mitzrayim. It's a pasuk in Terei Sedra. So the Mechilta says, when is it considered that Yidden believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they have the proper and true emunah b'Hashem, when they have also an emunah in Moshe Avdei? If Yidden are lacking in emunah in Moshe Avdoi, then they cannot have the proper Vayaminu B'ad Hashem. And the Rebbe again spoke various expressions. It is again underlining and stressing it is not our Inyan to get involved in any kind of debating with anybody regarding the Rambam or regarding the importance of learning Rambam or any other of these Inyanim. Our Inyan is just to fulfill our Inyanim. Our Inyanim again is to learn Torah and do mitzvahs and be involved. Nahafotos hamayonos chutza. As the Rebbe stresses, each and every word of this phrase has a deep meaning. Yofutzu, to really spread the well springs, and mayonos, to make sure that it is the well springs of Chassidus, and to make sure that it reaches chutza. It reaches the proper area to an area where Chassidus has not yet reached. But not chas v'shalom to be involved in any other type of inyanim. Our inyan is a pure inyan of learning, davening, and dinim the meibishten, and loy mehem v'loy mehameneim, the Rebbe said, not to be involved with any of those that are doing inyanim, destroying siyum Rambam, and are looking down, degrading all of these inyanim. It is not our inyan to have any shaykhs with these people whatsoever. Not to have debates, not to have discussions. Our inyan is to make sure that we are betoicha anan. We are in the cloud, and when we are in the cloud, the Rebbe again stressed, it will be the atem adveikim b'Hashem elokeichem chayim kulchem ayoim. Towards the end of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe again reminded everyone on the importance of the Inyan which was discussed earlier, seeing to it that our homes live up to the standard of being a Beis Chabad. In other words, that our homes excel and we excel in all of the areas of Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim, and that the same thing applies to children as well. The Rebbe also mentioned that when it comes Shabbos, and Shabbos we cannot give tzedakah, but Shabbos we can't make a donation on Shabbos. However, there is spiritual tzedakah which this can be done on Shabbos, helping a Yid. When we help a Yid, whether it is begashmius or beruchnius, assistance to another Jew, this is also an inyan of tzedakah, and this definitely could be done on Shabbos. As well as the Rebbe also mentioned, to learn, to learn the halachas of tzedakah, to learn about the importance of tzedakah. By doing this, on Shabbos we cannot physically give tzedakah, but this is definitely something which we can do. And by doing this, we are also getting involved in the greatness of tzedakah. And again, the Rebbe stressed very strongly the importance of all of these inyanim, and this applies to everyone. And the Rebbe says this is the request
of this year, in other words, this, what we're going away with from this huge Shvat, this great day, the Yotzet of the Friedike Rebbe, the Azlina Menei, which we are just parting from and which we just had this past Monday, for this year, the Rebbe says, the Inyan is to see to it, to increase as many Batei Chabad in general, and particularly regarding each and every one of us, to see to it that our homes, our Batim, should really be a Beis Chabad, and again, that the same applies to children. Chaboisai, after all the Sikha, there's no need to stress that every one of us has to make it his business and see to it for us as well as for our friends and families that we all attend the Siyum Rambam, B'Tashem tomorrow afternoon, 1 o'clock, the Marriott Hotel on Broadway and 46th. There will be buses leaving from Kingston and Eastern Parkway starting 12 o'clock to take everyone to the hotel as well as bringing everybody back from the hotel. A gute Woche.